Hey friends, tonight we're stepping straight into the strangest rabbit holes that history ever dug up. Forget polished legends or neat textbook tales. These are the mysteries that refuse to sit quietly on the shelf. We're talking werewolves who swore loyalty to God instead of the devil, phantom beasts that ripped through the French countryside, glowing lights that chased fighter planes in World War II, and a mysterious woman in a headscarf who may or may not have filmed the moment a president was assassinated. So, before you settle back, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you honestly enjoy this little corner of history's twilight zone. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see this strange campfire of ours stretch across time zones, with listeners from Tokyo to Toronto, from Paris to Manila, all joining in as the clock ticks differently in every corner of the globe. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan or let the rain soundtrack roll in the background. Imagine we're gathering in some ruined abbey or smoky tavern, trading stories that aren't supposed to have answers. These tales have been whispered for centuries, some born of folklore, some of propaganda, some of sheer human terror, and yet each one still resists a final explanation. We'll begin in 1691, with an elderly man in Livonia who told a court that yes, he was a werewolf, but not the kind they thought. He wasn't the devil's servant, he insisted, but a hound of God who fought witches in the swamps of hell itself. And that, my friends, is only the first descent into tonight's labyrinth of mystery. The Good Werewolf of Livonia, 1691-1692. Confession of a Hound of God in the Baltic borderlands of the late 17th century. An 80-year-old peasant named Thesis of Koltenbron, Livonia. Today, largely Latvia stood before judges, expecting to hear the usual formula of sin and submission. Instead, he calmly announced he was a werewolf and a righteous one. He did not serve the devil, he said, but God, 3 nights each year at harvest time. He and fellow werewolves slipped from their bodies, took on the form of wolves, and descended to hell through a swamp at the edge of the sea. There, witches and sorcerers in league with Satan hoarded the community's grain, livestock, and the fruits of the earth. Thesis and his band fought them, dodging, guardians wielding iron whips so that the season's abundance would return to ordinary people. The court had not summoned him for witchcraft at all. He had first appeared as a witness in a church burglary, but Thesis volunteered this otherworldly testimony, offering details that startled the magistrates. He explained that a witch had once broken his nose with a broom during a hell-bound melee. The scar was real and previously recorded in litigation. He even described how one could be made a werewolf by breathing into a jug and passing it with a toast. You will become like me. What he would not do was admit to satanic power. The devil's servants, he insisted, were the thieves of harvest, the witches, not the werewolves who fought them in early modern Europe. Authorities held that any traffic in supernatural power implied a diabolical pact. Famous French cases in the 16th century painted werewolves like Pierre Bergot and Michel Verdun as murderers manipulated by the devil. Against that backdrop, Thesis, Cosmosware, wolf warriors, battled hell for the sake of the fields was radical. He refused admonishments from the local Lutheran pastor, declaring the pastor had never actually fought Satan. It was an extraordinary peasant. Defiance of church authority. The court's verdict was telling. Unable to prove witchcraft or lycanthropy in the usual sense, The judges convicted him of heresy for spreading beliefs that might turn people from Orthodox Christianity. Punishment: 20 lashes and banishment. Severe by modern lights, unusually lenient by the standards of a self-proclaimed werewolf who would not repent. Modern scholars have wrestled with Thesis' world. Historian Carlo Ginzburg compared his testimony to the Benandante of 16th century Friola peasants who claimed to leave their bodies at night to fight witches for crop fertility. Perhaps, Ginzburg suggests, echoes of pre-Christian, shamanic, or agrarian rituals persisted beneath a Christian skin. Not all agree. Some warn against assuming an unbroken pagan survival. Others see Thesis' holy werewolf as social. Commentary in a stratified Livonia ruled by Baltic German landlords over Latvian and Estonian peasants, a symbolic inversion, in which the oppressed declared themselves feared wolves but gods, wolves defending their own harvest from elite witches, whatever its origin. Thesis' testimony stands as a rare but recorded moment when a European werewolf claimed the moral high ground, then lived to tell the tale in exile. The Beast of Gavorden, Itilo Si do Itilo Ti, a country under siege in June 1764. The hills of Gavorden in southern France turned into hunting grounds for a predator that seemed to step out of nightmare. The first recognized victim, Jean Boulette, a 14-year-old, was found savaged her death only the opening act of a 3-year terror. Survivors spoke of a huge wolf-like creature with shaggy reddish fur and a black dorsal stripe, stronger and bolder than the wolves everyone already feared. Many victims were women and children at pasture, their throats torn in textbook predation. Panic became a way of life. Parents kept children home, farmers carried weapons to the fields, and villagers organized makeshift guards. By January 1765, a band of village children led by Jacques Portefaux famously fought off an attack by standing together, a feat of courage that reached the court of Louis XV. The king sent professional wolf hunters. First came an experienced father and son team. When they failed, the royal huntmaster Francois Antoine arrived. In September 1765, Antoine killed an enormous wolf displayed in Versailles as the Beast. For a moment, Gavorden breathed again, but in December 1765, the killings resumed same ferocity, same methods. The royal court, having solved the matter, largely withdrew. Local resolve did not. A nobleman, the Marquis d'Apa, led regional hunts, and in June 1767 a skilled farmer hunter, Jean Chastel, shot a large wolf-like animal. The attacks ceased. Popular accounts say the carcass was opened and human remains found inside grizzly, confirmation that this at last was the killer. What then was the beast? The mainstream view today favors an unusually large and aggressive wolf, or several wolves over time, perhaps even a wolf-dog hybrid. The manner of attack, geography, and era fit. Others have proposed an escaped exotica subadult lion without a full mane or a hyena, each matching aspects of eyewitness descriptions: tawny coat, tufted tail, striped back, terrifying strength. But no record exists of such an escape, leaving that theory speculative. More Baroque suggestions: trained war dog in armor, unleashed by a deranged handler, or a supernatural monster amain, unsupported, with no definitive specimen preserved and conflicting eyewitness accounts. Certainty is out of reach. What remains is a historical reality framed by myth, a region traumatized, hunts that became national spectacle, and a final shot that ended the bloodletting without ending the mystery. The beast of Gavardin endures at the uneasy intersection of predator ecology, human fear, and the enduring human need to name what hunts us. The Babushka Lady, 1963. The calm witness who vanished in November 22, 1963. As President John F. Kennedy's limousine glided through Dealey Plaza, cameras peppered the crowd. Among the most intriguing figures recorded in photos and film is an unidentified woman in a headscarf tied under the chin, nicknamed the Babushka Lady. She stood on the south side of Elm Street. Camera raised even as shots rang out and spectators dove to the ground. Films track her movements. After the final shot, she kept filming, crossed Elm toward the grassy knoll, then walked east and disappeared into history. Police appealed for witnesses. No one by that description came forward. The Warren Commission noted many onlookers, but she remained a ghost in the background. In 1979, a House committee reviewing photographic evidence recorded that certain expected items were missing, including any Babushka Lady film. There are clues and claims. In 1994, researcher Gary Mack relayed a story from a Kodak employee. A brunette woman in her early 30s brought in a role she said included the assassination, with federal agents already present processing the Zapruder film. Her image reportedly proved blurry and useless, and her identity was not recorded. If true, this mundane failure might explain a lifetime of silence. In 1970, Beverly Oliver declared she was the Babushka Lady, claiming to men identifying themselves as FBI, took her undeveloped movie film and never returned it. But problems mount. She said she used a Yashica Super 8, a format not released until 1965. Confronted, she suggested a prototype. No evidence supports that. Oliver, then 17, also did not match the middle-aged stature seen in footage. Over time, she added dramatic and uncorroborated associations with Jack, Ruby, and Lee Harvey Oswald. Most historians remain unconvinced. Mainstream explanations are prosaic. She was a local or tourist who found nothing of value and chose anonymity. Conspiracy theories, galvanized by her poise under fire, imagine a Soviet agent, a US operative, a disguise device rather than a camera, even a time traveler. None has proof. What the record shows is a calm camera-holding witness whose material evidence, if it existed, ever entered the case. In a tragedy obsessed with frames and angles, the Babushka Lady is the most evocative absence of all. Foo Fighters 1944-1945, Lights That Hunted the Hunters in the Winter Skies of 1944 to 1945. Allied night fighters reported something unnerving. Glowing orbs that paced their aircraft, darted in sudden vectors, and then vanished. Crews of the U.S. 415th Night Fighter Squadron near the Rhine saw 8 to 10 bright orange lights, maneuvering with uncanny agility. Attempts to lock with radar or engage failed. Newspapers soon carried the story, and a name borrowed from the comic strip Smokey Stoverstuck, Foo Fighters. Reports multiplied over Europe and the Pacific. The lights appeared singly or in clusters, red, orange, white, sometimes green, matching turns, circling or racing ahead, yet never firing and never appearing on radar. Pilots suspected a new enemy weapon, perhaps a remote device meant to harass. But post-war interrogations and captured documents showed no Axis program that fit the behavior. Explanations ranged from atmospheric to technological. St. Elmo's fire, a plasma discharge known to mariners and pilots. Ken Halo wingtips in stormy conditions, but Foo Fighters often appeared in clear skies and moved with apparent intent. Ball lightning is rarer still, typically short-lived and not pack-hunting aircraft over miles. Fatigue and night-flying illusions can mislead the best crews. Yet many sightings involved multiple trained observers agreeing on the same maneuvers. Some photographs exist, though most are ambiguous. By 1953, the CIA's Robertson panel referenced wartime Foo Fighters while weighing the post-war UFO wave, suggesting natural or electromagnetic effects might account for some reports but confirming none. Later hypotheses invoked plasma phenomena forming at high altitude and descending, perhaps drawn by aircraft electromagnetic signatures. They remain just that, hypotheses. The oddest thing about Foo Fighters is their non-hostile persistence. Objects that did not shoot, jam, or crash aircraft, but shadowed them as if curious. Had the term flying saucer existed in 1944, the panel observed, those airmen would likely have used it. Instead, we inherit a wartime lexicon and an unsolved file where combat aviators, arguably the keenest skywatchers of their generation, they saw something that outflew their understanding. Glastonbury, 1191 the monks who found King Arthur after a catastrophic fire in 1184. Glastonbury Abbey lay in ruins and debt. Then, in 1191, the monks announced a discovery to shake Christendom. They had unearthed the tomb of King Arthur and Queen Guinevere. Chronicler Gerald of Wales reported the dig. Workmen sank nearly 20 feet and unearthed a hollowed oak trunca coffin holding 2 sets of remains. The male bones were of striking size. The female's skull lay with a lock of blonde hair that crumbled when touched. Most persuasive was a lead cross with a Latin inscription identifying Arthur and the Isle of Avalon. Pilgrims flocked. Donations flowed. The abbey's fortunes rose. Yet even in medieval terms, the fit seemed too perfect. The inscription used phrasing that, to modern eyes, looks 12th century, not sub-Roman or early medieval. It even called Guinevere Arthur's second wife, an acronym for the supposed era of burial. And there was politics. Henry II had grappled with Welsh resistance, kept alive by the prophecy of Arthur's return. Gerald says, Henry had tipped the monks where to dig between, to ancient cemetery, pillars based on law and records. Conveniently, the grave appeared exactly there, and Wales's hope of a sleeping deliverer suffered a blow. Arthur was dead, proven by bones on English monastic ground, modern historians, weighing the timing post-fire poverty, the inscriptional style, and the propaganda utility, largely judge the discovery a pious, fraudulent, audacious medieval solution to both fundraising and statecraft. Whatever the motive, Glastonbury successfully transformed legend into relic, and relic into revenue, establishing a pilgrimage that would endure for centuries. Glastonbury, 1191-2. Excalibur crosses the sea while. Glastonbury unveiled Arthur's bones. King Richard I, the Lionheart, was abroad on the Third Crusade. In Sicily in 1191, Richard and King Tancred sealed an alliance at Messina. As part of the ceremonial exchange of gifts, Richard presented a sword he identified as Excalibur. This moment marks one of the earliest political deployments of Arthurina outside Britain. A Norman Angevin king using the mythic blade to cement Mediterranean diplomacy. Why would the warrior king part with Britain's most storied weapon? Perhaps as grand theatre, a statement that chivalric legend bowed before realpolitik and crusader solidarity. Perhaps to broadcast that the Plantagenet crown, having tamed Arthur's legacy at Glastonbury, could dispense it at will. Whatever the reason, Tancred died in 1194. Sicily fell to Henry VI, and Excalibur's trail went cold, its fate unknown. Was it looted, absorbed into imperial treasuries, miscatalogued, or already a symbolic simulacrum, unrelated to anything dug up in Somerset? With no verifiable chain of custody, and no sword actually found in Gerald's detailed account of the tomb, the likelihood is high that this Excalibur was a manufactured relic, useful, dazzling, and politically expendable. Together, Glastonbury's grave and Richard's gift show how the 12th century learned to weaponize myth to fill shape identities, humble foes, and flatter friends. Arthur moved from bardic prophecy to monastic property to aristocratic currency, a legend leveraged across realms. Bushido, what samurai actually lived by, say, Bushido, and a familiar image flashes: armored swordsmen bound by an ancient uniform code of honor, loyalty, and bravery. But in Japan's medieval and early modern centuries, there was no single, fixed code. The term itself appears rarely in pre-modern texts. Instead, house laws, domain edicts, and local customs guided conduct. Tales from the Kamakura era, 13th century, celebrated courage heroes, declaring names before combat, but real samurai life could be pragmatic in the Sengoku age of warring states. Allegiances shifted. Clans hedged bets by splitting loyalties across rivals. An expediency often trumped ideals. Important texts, like the Hogakure and Budo Shushinsha, were written after the age of constant war, during the long peace of the Edo period. They present ideals: stoic death, rectitude, loyalty that look back on violence from a quieter world. Some early 20th century observers, for example, B.H. Chamberlain, pushed too far, calling Bushido a fabrication out of whole cloth. That overstates it. Virtues existed. Martial ethics evolved. But there was no medieval universal code that every samurai memorized and obeyed. The record shows something messier and more human. A martial elite navigating duty, survival, glory, and gain, with poetry and proverbs to justify each choice. Bushido, too. The modern invention of a timeless code. The paradox is that Bushido became famous only after the samurai class was abolished post-1868. Meiji Restoration. Building a modern nation, Japan's leaders sought unifying symbols. Intellectuals of the 1880s, 1900s articulated Bushido as a timeless virtue system, partly to resist over-westernization, partly to provide a moral spine for citizenship. In Iju Ling, Nitabeb Inazu published Bushido, the Soul of Japan in English Stitching Samurai, anecdotes with Confucian and Christian-colored ethics for Western readers. After Japan's victory in 1905 against Russia, Bushido became a global shorthand for Japanese discipline. At home, these ideals were nationalized. In the early 20th century, versions of imperial Bushido infused schooling and the military. Loyalty to a feudal lord became loyalty to the emperor and state. Self-sacrifice was glorified, and death before dishonor was weaponized. By the Ijil Senling Ijil Suwu, Bushido had been turned into state ideology, feeding fanatic resolve from the infantry trench to the kamikaze cockpit. After defeat in 1945, the term grew awkward in mainstream Japan, its moral capital spent. What survives today is a mythic composite, some genuine warrior virtues, some Edo moralizing, some Meiji nation building, and a heavy overlay of 20th century propaganda, modern invention, wearing ancient armor. Heinrich Müller, Ijo Siwu, the highest Nazi, who never turned up in May 1945. As Berlin collapsed, Heinrich Müller chief of the Gestapo, was seen in the Vorbunker on May 1st. "I will not be taken by the Russians," he reportedly said. Then he vanished. Post-war investigators chased every lead: interrogations, mail surveillance, searches of associates' homes. Nothing reliable surfaced. The name Heinrich Müller proved as slippery as the man Germany's equivalent of hunting a John Smith. Rumors served Cold War agendas. Some Western voices whispered the Soviets had taken him to train secret police. Some Eastern outlets hinted he had escaped west. In 1960, the capture of Adolf Eichmann rekindled hope that Müller, too, might surface. Eichmann reportedly speculated his old boss still lived, but offered no proof. In 1967, a man in Panama so closely resembled Müller that even the Gestapo chief's wife believed it was him. Fingerprints cleared the double. A 2001 release of CIA files indicated no post-war contact with Müller. The most parsimonious theory is that he died in Berlin in the war's last days. Yet no confirmed remains have been identified. Other tales insist he fled, served, or was eliminated later. Unlike many officials whose ends are documented suicide, capture, trial Müller remains a blank space at the top of the Nazi hierarchy, an absence that invites every story and confirms none. Philip of Cognac c. 1180 early 1200s, the Lionheart's shadowed sun amid Plantagenet pageantry and war rode a man we glimpse only in fragments, Philip of Cognac. The only acknowledged illegitimate son of Richard I, the Lionheart. Likely born around 1180, Philip came of age as Richard fought, ruled, and negotiated across a restless empire. The king arranged Philip's marriage to Amélie Omery of Cognac, heiress of a strategic lordship in Saint-Anger. Shrewd planned to root his son in Aquitanian politics. But Amélie died around Jojo, childless. Richard retained the castle, later granting it elsewhere. Philip's brief tenure as Lord of Cognac ended as quickly as it began. Then comes a flash of vengeance. Chronicler Roger of Howden records that, in 1199, after Richard died from a crossbow wound, Philip slew the Viscount of Limoges Aymar, the rebel ultimately responsible for the fatal quarrel. No other source corroborates this cinematic act. Perhaps it is true, perhaps a legend of filial justice woven around a son otherwise drifting from the record. We know King John, Richard's brother, acknowledged Philip in 1201 with a notable grant. And then he likely died in the early 13th century. A young man gone without heirs and without a chronicler to care. The loudest question is the quietest line in the sources. Who was Philip's mother? Medieval clerks often named an illegitimate child's mother only when she was of standing. Every record keeps her unnamed. That silence spurs speculation. A commoner, a lesser noble, a vassal's daughter whose identity was prudently suppressed. Darker suggestions that she was not there of her own will. And still others that Philip was not Richard's son at all, masking rumors about the king's private life. None of this can be proved. What we can say is that a king famed for crusades and courage left no legitimate heir, and only one shadowed son who stepped into view long enough to marry, perhaps to avenge, and then to vanish. In a dynasty obsessed with lineage, Philip of Cognac is a genealogical ghoster, reminder that even under crowns, some lives pass between the lines.